This episode of Outside Insights is brought to you by Placers, a values-led staffing partner helping businesses and individuals reach their highest potential. Build a flexible workforce or take the next step in your career at myplacers.com. Welcome to the Outside Insights podcast. We have a big goal, and it's to provide content and ideas that help people close their personal and professional gaps. We kind of do that by hearing how others have done it. I'm your host, Chris Burkhardt, and today I'm beyond thrilled to have Jeff Tunn on the show. Welcome to the show, Jeff.
Hey, it's great to be here, Chris. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
I am too. Thanks for coming on Outside Insights today. It's much appreciated. So I think my audience always appreciates where I try to summarize where we're going with an episode in an upfront in a little bit of way. So it's going to be a tongue twister, but it's kind of fun. So I think I've got you right. You're a self-proclaimed hippie, coder, IT guy, CIO. So you know something about leadership, and I know you've spent some time coaching and doing talks about that. But you ended up writing a book about Lewis and Clark that's really about relationships and leadership lessons. Do I have that about right?
You do, yeah. Long hair hippie COBOL programmer to writing about Lewis and Clark. Absolutely.
And
crazy journey.
A great journey, though, and I hope we get to unpack some of that. The title was Uncharted Moments.
Yes.
For those that are listening to this will be coming out in the fall of 2025. Are we close to a book launch by then?
Yeah, we're getting closer. We're getting closer. It might be spring.
All right,
might be
fair enough.
First of the year. Yeah.
But I think that's great. I got an early preview, and I did really enjoy the book. I have a love of history. This will bore you a little, Jeff, but Stephen Ambrose's book, Undaunted Courage, was a great book for me, who kind of picks one from each genre. And I love leadership. So I think we'll have fun talking about those things. And I bet we'll tease out enough of the book. And I see that you're putting a lot on social media about the book and starting to write more about it. So people can kind of get warmed up about that, if you will.
Absolutely.
History's a great teacher. This was a story about a journey, relationships, and some good stuff for leadership?
Yeah.
Where do we start?
Just the idea of history as a teacher of leadership, I think when you look at the way people before us have reacted in different situations, and when you unpack that, you can find the leadership lessons in it. For me, it's been Lewis and Clark. For others, it could be other figures from history. But where this really came home for me is in a couple of different places. First, I had an executive coach. When I got into executive leadership, I hired an executive coach. And the way that he does coaching is based on history. So he picks a person from history and you study them for a year. Deep dive into what was going on in their life, how they reacted to it, what they did. And he pulls out what are the lessons for you in your leadership journey. So to me, that was cool because I was already in love with the story of Lewis and Clark when that happened. We ended up studying Theodore Roosevelt for a year, which was fantastic.
T-Rex, one of my all-time favorite books.
Yeah. And this whole Lewis and Clark in leadership was I'll call it an accident, if those things really exist. I was talking with my boss one day after my wife and I had taken one of our various Lewis and Clark trips. And he said, Jeff, you know what you really ought to do is you ought to write about the leadership lessons from Lewis and Clark. And Chris, I laughed at him. I said,
yeah,
dude, it was 200 years ago.
I kind of get that. Like, yeah, you can see
what are we going to learn from it? But I took him up on the challenge and I started digging into the journals of Lewis and Clark and pulling out those leadership lessons. And it's been a fantastic journey of discovery, to coin that phrase.
Well, I think it's a good phrase to coin. And I think it's fair to say that you really did research this. That, like, I don't think this is just something that you glanced at. This is something. So when he says he researched it, you researched it. You want to talk a little bit about that journey?
Well, uh, I can't tell you how many books that I read on the subject. First of all, I read their journals, which when you look at their journals, it's like the an old phrase, the Encyclopedia Britannica. Um,
Okay.
right? It's 13 volumes. It's over 1 million words of their words from their journey. And I've read every single word of that. But then I also Undaunted Courage, as you mentioned, and dozens of other books. But then the real learning took place. Wife and I decided back in 2003 that we were going to follow the Lewis and Clark Trail. Now, we didn't use a boat, we used an RV.
Although you thought about it.
Yeah, we thought about it. We thought about I thought about it. She never would agree to that, I'm sure. But we wanted to be where they were 200 years to the day
Mm.
after they were there. This was the bicentennial commemoration of their journey from 2003 to 2006. And we went on these trips. There was a total of 14 trips, all told, that we took around that topic of following that trail and trying to be where they were and just seeing what was there. And that journey really taught us an incredible amount when we look back on it and when I reflect back on it today.
Jeff, as we get into that, I bet you most people don't understand the length of the journey and what maybe those 14 stops meant. Any idea of the length they traveled? And give a little geography lesson kind of on what went into those 14 spots, if you don't mind.
Oh, absolutely. So technically, they started, well, Meriwether Lewis started in Monticello, Charlottesville, Virginia, the home of Thomas Jefferson. And he travels across the eastern part of the country to Pittsburgh, builds a boat, floats down the Ohio River, meets up with William Clark near Falls of the Ohio, which is across the river from Louisville, Kentucky, in Indiana. I'm a Hoosier, so I have to say it was Indiana, not Kentucky. And from there, they start recruiting the people of the expedition, and they go down the Ohio to the Mississippi to the Missouri. They go up the Missouri River to its source, and then cross the Rocky Mountains in the winter, and spend the winter on the Pacific coast and come home. It's about 8,000 miles that they traveled. Most of that against the current of some of the strongest, most powerful rivers in our country. Just an incredible tale of endurance.
Mostly by boat and walking, no mules or horses unless they traded them along the way.
They had some horses when they crossed the mountains.
Okay.
They actually took two horses with them when they left the St. Louis area. They lost one, and then the other one got lame along the way. But from the time they left what is today Bismarck, North Dakota, and went towards the mountains, they were solely by water, by foot, until they got to the foot of the mountains and traded for some horses to cross the mountains in the winter.
Where'd the inspiration for the idea come from?
That was Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson had this vision of uh, what our country might be.
Yes.
He was in the process of, he dreamed about doing this for years, knowing that he needed to establish trade routes across the continent. There were 4 or 5 other expeditions before Lewis and Clark did theirs. The 4 or 5 others didn't go anywhere.
Didn't
Uh,
succeed.
you know,
Right.
this was the first one that was successful in reaching the Pacific and coming back. But he did it because of commerce. He wanted to establish trade routes. He wanted to establish alliances with the indigenous peoples that lived in this land. He wanted to beat Britain across the continent, and that took a few more years after that. But that was his real vision, was tying this continent together. It was really uh, a wild vision of imagination when you consider what we knew at the time in the 1800s was Europe. A bunch of small countries tied together, very loosely tied together, at war all the time. And now you've got, at the time of Jefferson, 16 states that were tied very loosely together, still trying to form our country. And he decides, no, we need to go get the Louisiana Purchase and expand.
So, time Louisiana Purchase, we bought all that land from France. Was it manifest destiny, or was that kind of afterwards? Was that
That was later. That phrase didn't get coined until much later. But that was what he had in mind when
yes?
you read some of his writings. Is that's what he was thinking. He just didn't use that term.
It sort of makes some sense. So, the history may not interest everybody, but was the route predestined, or did they just do it by whatever the waterway allowed? Did they just take the path of least resistance?
They just took the waterway. The whole idea was to follow the Missouri River to its source and then locate the waters of the Columbia River watershed and follow it to the Pacific Ocean. They knew where the mouth of the Columbia River was. That was discovered by Gray in, I want to say, 1792 or 93. So they knew the coordinates of that, and they knew that the Missouri River went north
Okay.
and then went west. So they were kind of on parallel, thinking, well, it's going to be an easy jump across the mountains. They thought those Rocky Mountains were like the Alleghenies and the Blue Ridge. They were a little bit wrong about that.
Well, they sure were. So what we're talking about is they crossed over the Rocky Mountains, kind of Montana, Wyoming, Idaho,
Yeah.
and had quite a journey to get through, and wouldn't have done it without native relationships, right?
Oh, absolutely. They are not successful any way, shape, or form, and they probably don't even survive without the relationships with the native peoples that they encountered. Really beginning with the Ottos that they encountered in what is today Nebraska, then the Mandan and Hidatsa up near Bismarck, all the way across the Shoshone, Nez Perce, Clatsop, Chinook, just dozens and dozens of tribes.
Having had the pleasure of read your book, you and your wife Carmen, you talk openly about how your relationship with history, but in particular with the indigenous people, evolved.
Yeah,
Um, I think that's a fair way to say it.
absolutely.
Can you talk a little about that? I think that's a very contemporary notion that I think is important.
Well, and it's something that we've continued to learn about, even back in those early days. Was really I'd call it an eye opening. You know from uh, growing up in your history classes that there were people here when the Europeans came to the United States. And you don't really think about, or at least I never really thought about, the Lewis and Clark expedition in relation to the people that they encountered. And what we learned very early on, it was actually a talk by a guy named Gerard Baker. Gerard was with the National Park Service for a number of years, and he is a Native American. I believe he's Mandan. He might be Hidatsa. I can't remember
And that's
exactly.
North Dakota?
North Dakota.
North Dakota, got
Yeah.
it.
So he gave a talk that we attended in Louisville at one of the events, and it was about listening to the people, listening to their stories, listening to the lands. And so we really started to go into this with that listening ear. What are the stories that were being told? And one of the I'd say one of the most poignant, one of the most kind of funny ones was we're on the Pacific coast, and the head of the Clatsop Native Americans tribe was speaking, and Joe Scoville, I think, was his name, and he's talking, and his opening line was, um, "We had been here for thousands of years. We weren't here waiting to be discovered by Lewis and Clark." And I'm paraphrasing his quote just a little bit, but it's like, you're right. They were living their lives, uh, good lives, living off the land, living with the land, um, and they weren't waiting to be discovered. They knew where they were.
Who the heck are we to think that we discovered and saved them?
Yes, yes, yes,
Uh,
yes.
that's
Yeah.
I'm obviously putting my own Burkhardt spin on that, but what a egomaniacal view of the world we had.
Yes,
Yet,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, I'm just gonna backtrack just for a second for a little bit of context. From a career perspective, you grew up in IT world, programming, into leadership. What how does that parallel what you've done with this book? Is there any parallel or connection? Like how do the how do the bits and bytes of IT relate to this journey and this book?
Well, it's to me, yes, I was a career IT professional, started out as that long haired hippie COBOL programmer. But it was when I got into leadership and management, to me, it became more about the people and less about the technology, more about business, less about the technology. It wasn't technology, it was business and how technology can be used to grow the business, change the business, and evolve the business. And so it's that kind of that I call it the lifelong learning because I did the same thing when I became a programmer. I'm self-taught. I taught myself how to write COBOL, PL1, uh, assembler language, machine language, basic. I mean, I just dove into it and taught myself all that. When I got drug kicking and screaming into the world of management and leadership, because I was going to be that COBOL programmer my entire career.
You're going to sit in
Um,
the dark and work on your own.
that's right. Yeah, yeah. But I ended up going into that, and I did the same thing then that I did when I became that programmer. Is I began to study. I started reading. I started observing people, learning from those around me. And then when the Lewis and Clark piece came along, it was the same thing. Dig in and learn, understand, scope it out. So it's that I'd say the common thread is digging in and learning, reading and understanding, seeking to understand, I guess is the best way to describe it. And so, yeah, you've got technology on one side and you've got a dugout canoe that weighs a ton on the other side, and they're connected.
So, in the spirit of this, I talked about this show being about helping people close gaps. My fundamental life experience was my mentor said to me that there's always a gap. There's a gap in expertise, knowledge, capability, time, resources, what have you. And if you can just try to measure each day and your ability to close important gaps for yourself, one day you'll look up with the gap closed. So, hearing you talk about how you attack this from a knowledge perspective, I think that's an important thing for people to take away.
Yeah.
They may not know how to do it. I think you had to learn how to do it, right? It
Yep.
wasn't just like you knew instantly how to close the gap, but I think that's a great lesson
Absolutely.
for everybody within this.
Well, and it's, you know, life puts you in positions sometime. Back when I learned how to be a programmer, I had fallen in love with computers because I bought a Commodore 64 to date myself, and just loved. They'd send out a magazine once a month with all this code in it, and you'd sit and type that code in, and the computer would do what you told it to do. And I wasn't in a position where I could go to get formal education in that at the time. I was young, married, had a kid, and so what I had time to do was read.
Right.
And so I threw myself into that. And I'd say my leadership mantra became, and I think it was my executive coach Dan Miller, the same one that did it based on history. His advice to me was you have to own who you are, right? Own that long-haired hippie COBOL programmer. Own this Lewis and Clark geek that you are, and that's if you're authentic and bring that forward to people, um, people will gravitate towards your leadership, and your leadership will grow. You have to own who you are.
So, on the title of my book, Opposite the Crowd, this is not to sell my book, it's just to make the connection. To be who you want to be, you must know who you are.
There you go. There you go.
So there is a very obvious connection, and I do identify with it. Well, maybe a way to talk about your leadership journey is you do reference what you can learn from their expedition about leadership. What are some of the key leadership lessons that we can learn from Meriwether and the captain for
Yeah.
that journey?
Yeah. The, years ago, when I first got challenged to write about this, I looked for 10 traits of a leader, right? And uh, a leader is transparent. A leader takes risks. There's a list of them, and I wrote a small ebook, which is glorifying it. It's more of a PDF than an ebook, but anyway, it was 10 traits of a leader by Lewis and Clark, and so I used them as the examples. Since then, I've continued to learn and continued to dive in. Was honored to be one of the people that created a leadership development program based on Lewis and Clark. And I'd say, looking at that we pull out 5 key elements of leaders from that. First of all, vision. The vision that Jefferson had was astounding for that age. He probably understood more about what was going on in the world and in our country than just about anybody at the time. And he put this all into this. Today we'd call it a vision statement, right?
Yes.
Um, but it was this letter that he wrote to Meriwether Lewis, and it goes into all this detail of what that vision meant. Right? It wasn't just here's the platitude, discover
Yes.
the Northwest Passage. Right? It was no, we want you to do this, 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 and this. So vision was huge. And then when you
Jeff,
look at the captains, oh, go ahead.
I would say, and one of the challenges of modern leadership is you have to have vision with limited information, limited time. He certainly was a smart man and well studied, but he had limited information by which to craft that vision.
Yes,
That is a modern problem too.
absolutely. All of these are modern problems too, right?
Yeah, that's key.
Right? I mean, that's the golden nugget from looking at history is we talk about the uncertain times that they were in the early 1800s. Well,
Well,
we're
same
constantly in
thing. Yeah.
uncertain times, right?
Yes.
So you think about vision. The thing that amazes me is Meriwether Lewis reaches out to William Clark and says, "Hey, will you be my co-captain?" What? That's like, okay, Chris, you just gave me the new job of being a project manager on this great new project. And I say, hold on, I need my buddy to help me. Who does that? Right?
In a hierarchical world.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, I don't know
So
if
he
the world
reaches out,
understood co anything then.
right? And they build this incredible team. By
Mhm.
the time they leave Fort Mandan, which is Bismarck, North Dakota area, there's 33 souls that go west with this group. It's 32 men, it's 31 men, a woman, Sacagawea, and a baby that go west.
And one dog?
And one dog, Seaman, the
Very
dog.
good.
Can't forget the Newfoundland.
No, you cannot.
And they head west, and they're this incredibly cohesive team. They built this team that cared about each other, trusted each other, respected each other, and would do anything for each other as they're going across the Great Plains of what ends up being our country.
Is it fair to say survival is great team building?
Yeah, yeah, I think so. Yeah,
It,
yeah,
it may be, but it could have gone another way. I mean,
it could have.
you could be very individualistic, right? You could.
Right.
So they
Well, and
had.
they kind of were in the first half when they leave. When they leave the St. Louis area and start going north on the Missouri River, there's several reports of court martials and uh, uh, people not following the rules, and a couple of folks that deserted and they sent people after them. All those kinds of things were happening, and then after that, none of that happened. They needed to flush all that out, and then
Okay.
they're a team.
It didn't have anything to do that was closer to home at that point.
Yeah, possibly, but they were
I get
still
it.
way out in the middle of
But they
nowhere at
were
the time.
storming and forming until
Yeah,
they normed later in
yeah,
the trip.
yeah, absolutely.
So vision team.
Uh, Overcoming obstacles, that there were known obstacles. They kind of knew some things that they might encounter. There was others that were like they thought they might find woolly mammoths still wandering the plains. They had no idea, right? And it's one of the things that really stunned me at some point in my learning about this is that they had a map. They took a map with them. I always read about all the maps that they drew, and I loved the maps that they drew, but they took a map with them. The west of St. Louis, there's one word written on the map: conjectural. There's no drawing, it's just a blank space and the word conjectural. That's what they're heading into: conjectural,
The unknown.
the unknown. So, how do you overcome the obstacles. You know, they 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 learn about the Great Falls of the Missouri, as we call them today. They learned about the Great Waterfall from the Mandan and Hidatsas in the winter, and they know they're going to encounter them on their way to the mountains. Well, when they encounter them, there's not one waterfall, there's not two, there's not three, there's five. They thought they were going to have a half day portage around those waterfalls. It ended up being a month, 18-mile portage. How do you keep going in the face of that? What keeps them going? How
And
do you overcome that obstacle,
that's not a
right?
20-pound that's not a 20-pound canoe.
No, the canoe empty weighs about a ton, and they decided that they're going to put wheels on it, so they make axles out of cottonwoods. They form wheels out of the cottonwoods as well. Put them on this canoe, and they haul it up and down the ravines for 18 miles, 3 or 4 times.
Might be a great leadership, exercise program if it doesn't kill you, right? I assume they weren't counting steps and calories.
No, probably not. Probably
Yeah.
not.
I did
They
read one where that they ate each member ate 5 pounds of elk per day.
It was
Is that right?
so yeah, 9 pounds of protein. So whether it was bison, whether it was elk, but yeah, 9 pounds per person per day.
Oh my
Uh,
goodness.
and then they hit the mountains and there's no game,
Okay.
right? So they almost starved to death in the mountains. They survive by melting snow to make soup, um, killing some of the horses to eat, and that's how they survive.
So those are 3 great points on leadership. Unless you have anything else that you wanna cover, that's a great.
Oh, I could talk about it all day long, Chris. We
No. Okay. Well, we'll weave it back in. The title of the book, Uncharted
yeah,
Moments.
Uncharted Moments.
Talk about it. It has an obviously a significant meaning throughout the book.
Yeah, so we decide very early on that we're going to go on these journeys, and so we go to Monticello for the opening ceremony. We go to Clarksville, Indiana, Louisville, Kentucky for the next one. These are all events that are being held along the Lewis and Clark Trail during that bicentennial commemoration period from '03 to '06. We kind of extended it on into '07 and '08, but that's part of the book as well. But what started happening very early on, we realized there was some some unusual happenings that would happen around us, just some wild things that you can't make up. It's because they happen because you're there. Some of them were related to specifically to Lewis and Clark and how we were on the trail. Others just because we were out there doing different things, right? um the first one, anyway, we began to call those uncharted moments because they're moments you can't plan for.
So
We
I
went,
don't think I'm correct here, but I'm a backpacker, and we talk about trail magic, where we'll come around something and
yeah,
someone will have left a six pack of soda for us, or the sun hits just right,
exactly.
or we meet somebody where it's just this incredible connection to something. Am I close, or is it?
Yeah, trail magic.
Well,
Absolutely, trail
uncharted
magic.
moments, it's, okay. So but it's significant things that happened that were coincidental or just special?
Both.
Gotcha.
Sometimes they were coincidental, sometimes they were special. It started the first one. We're sitting at this ceremony at Monticello, Virginia, Thomas Jefferson's home. It was outdoors. It was 8 degrees in January, and we're sitting on the lawn in metal folding chairs.
Stuck to
There's
them.
like 4,000 people or something like that. And Ken Burns, uh, the great document maker, filmmaker, is up talking about Stephen Ambrose because Stephen Ambrose passed away just months before the bicentennial.
Okay.
And he's up talking about them, and the sky is just crystal clear blue, right? Just not a cloud in the sky. And Carmen and I happen to look up as Burns is talking, and this hawk flies over the audience, across up over the dome of Monticello, and disappears. Not part of the program, just right then when Burns is talking about Ambrose. And it was just like it just blew us away. It was just cool, right? It's trail magic. You see this. And then you begin to dig into the symbols that eagles, hawks bring to the indigenous people, or that, and it's like, wow, this was really a special moment. Some of them were a little more concrete than a hawk flying over Monticello. Um, I
You weren't
tell
you weren't the
so
only one though that felt that that hawk was symbolism, which is pretty neat.
we were not. Months later, in fact, I think it was the following year. It would have been July of 2004. We had the opportunity to meet Dayton Duncan, another great author, filmmaker. Was in the Ken Burns documentary about Lewis and Clark. And so Carmen convinces me to go up and tell Dayton about the hawk, tell him that
Right.
I saw this thing. And I'm like, God, he's going to think I'm some nut job, right? Talking about a bird flying over the group. And so I walk up to him afterwards and I tell him that story. And he kind of tears up and he looks at me and said, I saw it too. I saw it too.
Just to tie it back, I think Carmen prompted you to be your authentic self, speaking of leadership a little bit.
Yes, yes.
Uh, because I get it. We're a little embarrassed. What if he didn't see it? But by risking what a shared experience, right?
Yeah,
Things that
absolutely.
actually matter,
Yeah, yeah.
actually matter.
He saw it too, and he felt the same feeling that we felt, right? That it was somehow I'll use the phrase a spiritual event in some way, right? It was, yeah, yeah.
Yes. So we could probably do a whole podcast on leadership, but I have a sense that since you took an RV, you might even be able to do, you and Carmen, some sort of RV travel show. You were on the road quite a bit, touring some of the events with that. Anything you
Absolutely.
want to share about that experience?
Well, first of all, it was Carmen's idea. We had been just driving to these events, and we drove out to the one near Kansas City, Missouri, and we were on our way back. We stopped at a winery. And so one of life's lessons is don't make financial decisions while you're having a glass of wine.
Or
Uh,
be prepared to pay the consequences.
right. Because she says, well, you know what we ought to do? We ought to buy an RV
Seemed like a
and we
good
could do
thing
these
after
trips
the
by
second
RV.
Chardonnay. Yeah.
And I'm like, what a great idea. So long story short, we end up buying an RV and it became kind of our well, first of all, you lock yourself in a tin can traveling down the road at 70 miles an hour with another person for hours and hours and hours on end. You get to know each other pretty well in that confined space. We were newlyweds, I should add. We'd only been married a year when we started out on these adventures, so we're learning a lot about each other as we're going on this. But when you get into the RVing, the motorhome, it's a motorhome. It's not an RV,
Fair enough.
but I call it an RV. Carmen calls it a motorhome. She's that way. So everybody, when you go to an RV park, they all have the stories about disasters that happen, and you when you're in an RV, you're carrying all your stuff with you, including all your stuff, right? So you've got your toilet, you've got your shower, so you've got a black tank and a gray tank, and almost everybody has a story that involves emptying those tanks. And usually it involves getting covered with it.
And it's not dishwater you're covered in
It is
typically.
not
Yeah.
dishwater. No,
Yeah.
it is yeah. So that happens along the way.
Well, Jeff, I'm
There's
an Airstream owner, and I too have been covered in non-dishwater, so
Yes, it
I can relate.
everybody has those stories, right?
Yes, exactly.
My first story, and I think I tell this in the book about the first time we take this out. There's two different types of campsites when you're an RVer, right? There's a pull through,
This made
which
me
are the
laugh out
easy,
loud. This made
right?
me, yes.
You just go right in.
Heaven forbid you got it back in.
You
No
got a back
way.
in.
No.
And our RV did not have the automatic levelers, right? So you've got these little pieces of plastic that stack up varying heights. For each wheel is a different height because you're not on level ground, and you have to back up onto those things. Well, the very first campground we go to is somewhere in Kentucky, and they thought they would be really, really cool, and they built a deck at each campsite so that when you park your RV, you're walking out onto a deck. How cool is that? Try backing up for the first time and getting close enough to that you don't hit it, and close enough that you can step out onto it. And you want to test a marriage. I always said a test of marriage is go canoeing with somebody and put one in the front, one in the back of a canoe. But I think giving directions in an RV when you're this big in the mirror, right, and you're trying to do these hand signals to tell the other person where to go, and we're just struggling. And when you walk in, when you go into an RV park, all these people are watching you because that's what they do.
They
They
might
watch.
even pull up lawn chairs and watch you park,
Yeah,
frankly.
exactly. Pop a cold one and watch the
Exactly.
roof, right? Well, finally, after, I don't know, 20, 30 minutes of trying to get it in here, one of these guys walks up. He says, "You want me to back it in for you?" And I said, "Oh, God, thank you." My pride was gone by then, right?
As it I have been there, Jeff.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
have been
yeah,
there. It's sort of the badge of courage that you earn, and over time, this very artificial, weird thing becomes normal, right? It
yes,
becomes the
yes.
path and the way, but it isn't in the beginning,
It is
not at
not.
all.
You got to learn all about it. Yeah, yeah,
So you went on this path, obviously, to study Lewis and Clark and history and all these things, but you in the book you very clearly articulate new relationship with Carmen, but this really became about you and Carmen.
yeah, yeah. This is a book that I have wanted to write for 20 years. These stories are from the early 2000s, and I I struggled. I didn't have the storyline. What's the story arc? Other than, we drove here and we saw that, no one cares, right? It's not going to be a travel log. No one's going to care. Um, even with the incredible Uncharted moments or the trail magic that we had, it's like, what's the story? And I was sitting with at an appointment with Carmen, and we'll dive into that if you want to take it that direction. But I was sitting at this appointment, just thinking about her, right? And I realized that the story was us, was her. It was our relationship and how these journeys, like I said, you can't lock yourself in a tin can driving 70 miles an hour down the red asphalt of Nebraska without learning a lot about somebody. Um, uh, it really forged our relationship. The trials, the tribulations, the funny stories from the RV, the more dangerous stories from the RV that I can share. But it was really that time that crystallized the foundation of our relationship. Second marriages for both. I had kids, she did not, so she's stepmom coming into that situation,
Right.
learning how to be a stepmom, and just the experiences and that common language, that common love of nature, the country, the story, rivers, confluences, all of that forged who we became.
It's interesting because I think they were your loves at first,
Yeah,
and then it became mutual.
yeah,
Is
yeah.
that fair? I mean, she certainly had her
Absolutely. Even
own.
canoeing was my love, right? I mean,
Yeah,
that was something that I was passionate about. She was relatively new to it. Well, relatively, yeah. I might have been the one to take her on I think she'd been on a canoe before, but really fell in love with it with her and I doing it. Lewis and Clark the same way. This was kind of my thing, but she began to identify with the story as well. The adventure of the story itself, the trek across this beautiful landscape that makes up our country, the indigenous peoples, her heart went out to them also as we learned about this. And so you learn a lot about someone's heart as you're going through this, and just it was an amazing experience that formed the foundation of what is now, gosh, a month from now we'll be celebrating 24 years of marriage. So
so in reading the book, you can see the evolution of your relationship. You write about that. As you wrote the book, does that influence your relationship? Someone's gotta read it.
yes, yeah. Let me tell you, there's been a lot of tears as I've shared what I've written and we've remembered in that, and I think for your listeners, Chris, to understand, Carmen is sick.
Yes.
I mentioned going to an appointment. It was a neurologist appointment. And writing this, we've been in this new kind of journey, this uncharted moment, if you will, to use it in that way, of navigating this disease for a couple of years now. And writing the book for me became cathartic. It became, it reminded me of who she is, not necessarily who she was, which is what it started out to be, right? It reminded me of the person that is in there in the midst of this disease, and it really pulled me out of my oh woe is me headspace I was in.
It became a celebration?
Yeah, yeah,
That's what I'm
absolutely.
reading
Celebrate,
from.
yeah, a celebration of who we became together. The confluence of two people, to use the river metaphor.
So, yes, obviously, you talk about this in the book. You talk about the diagnosis, and obviously, you bring uh, your banter back and forth helps understand much more of this journey, both not only where you are and why you're there and
Yeah.
what it means to you both. Um, what do you want readers to take away from the book? What do you hope that feeling is?
You know, it's a love story wrapped in a memoir, mapped in a history. I want people to be aware and look for their own uncharted moments, because we don't always know the trail magic when it happens right away. Sometimes it's in retrospect that you're looking back on it and you say, "Oh, that was really crazy that that happened," right? Or wasn't that beautiful the way the sun was hitting that the mountainside? Um, but be open to those uncharted moments, open to getting off the highway and exploring the small roads, the back roads, the forgotten places, because there's stories there. Those places. I I use the phrase in the book a lot:
Yeah.
sacred places, sacred moments. And I don't mean it in a religious context. There's one or two that have the religion side to it, that I talk about in the book, but it's more that quiet space, that sense of being, that sense of connectedness to each other, the connectedness to the land, the connectedness to some power bigger than us, whatever that power, whatever you believe that power to be. It's those moments that are the unscripted, the uncharted moments. That's what I
So,
want people to take.
so when I hear you talk about that, you know, take the state road, see the small town, stop. In some ways, it is literal. It's go see, go look around and see what's around that you're not going to see on Route 70 or I-95, right? Part of it's
Yeah,
literal. But I also get a sense what you're really saying about you is like stop and live.
yeah,
Quit running so darn hard on the treadmill, right?
huh?
Am I right in that? I mean, obviously, I
Yeah,
had the benefit of reading 400 or 500 pages. So I think it's a great lesson for people. And I think in today's world, I don't know if people know how to be authentic as a leader or themselves, to know who they are, or to know how they should spend their time to be grounded and centered and be where they are.
yeah. You have to take that time, take those moments. I mean, this is all happening, and my career is doing that proverbial hockey stick, right? I'm moving from a middle manager to a director of a global organization, to CIO of a couple of organizations, and it is just doing that. And so I'm working hard. I mean, I am working hard, long days, to do that. And I think looking back on it, the lesson is we took the time out to take these trips. We made them a priority and we took these trips. My guess is there was a lot of times when it wasn't convenient to go on the trip. You know, there was looming project deadline, that kind of thing. And even it started out as almost silliness, right? It was, I wanted to go touch the water of the Ohio. I wanted to go touch the water of the Mississippi, touch the water of the Missouri and the Columbia. Every river that we saw, I wanted to dip my hand in. And it almost became, like I say, silly, or the posing like the Lewis and Clark sign where I'm pointing down the trail, right? Becomes goofy, but it's those moments that bring clarity to the moment. I mean, it's you're doing something silly, but now you look back on it, it's like it's just taking the time to feel, taking the time to listen, like Gerard Baker talked to us about early on, as we talked about at the beginning, listening to what's around you and just being.
Well, a lot of people don't get to travel to know what it's like to be at a spot where it feels silly to put your hand in the water. So that's the first thing. So maybe people got to get out and travel and find their own river, right? Whatever that means. But I no, I do what you mean. I think you did a great job explaining it because, at first it's like, all right, you got to go do that. But I think it sort of built on itself. It became cumulative.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And by the way, his book opens with his love of canoeing and rivers. So it all makes sense that, right? You're as weird about rivers, right, as you are
yeah.
about Lewis and Clark, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
or as
Yeah.
geeky. Rivers
Rivers are
may
such
be,
a great metaphor. It's such a great metaphor. The my executive coach, Dan Miller, I've mentioned him a couple times, uses rivers as a metaphor for your life, and so it's the Ton River, right? But when we developed this Lewis and Clark program that I mentioned before, we teach about a river as a metaphor for your leadership,
mm,
right? And I even take people, I get them out of their comfort zone, walk them through a visualization exercise of want you to close your eyes, pretend you're stepping into a river. The water is cold as it rushes around your feet. You go deeper into the water, and you can start to feel the water push against your calves, and blah blah. So you go deeper into the water, and then you back them back out, and then let's connect that to leadership. When you're deep in the water, you're feeling the pressure of that current, and you have to part your legs a little bit to get stability against the current, the rocks in the bottom, and all that. Your team is in the water all day, every day. They're fighting that current. Where are you? Are you in the current with them? Are you on the banks helping them navigate around an obstacle in the water? Or are you up on the vista overlooking the entire valley? The art of leadership is knowing when to be where. You can't always be in the water. You can't always be on the vista. You have to know where your team needs you to be at that moment. And so we challenge the people throughout this course is where are you in relation to the river? Where should you be? And how do you get there? And we talk about that through this course.
what's that course's name?
Uh, the Lewis and Clark Experience, A New Way Forward.
That is a fantastic visualization because we're all sitting here deciding where we are. My early career, servant leader, I was in front of the rapids, standing there fighting them off all the time.
Yes.
Like that was my job. Um, I'd never been the guy up high on the vista thinking, "Oh, it looks pretty calm down there. They're fine." But I think that, well, that's a usable exercise for people to take away. It's fantastic. So I've been dying to ask you this question because I think I'm going to get a history, a leadership. If you were going to gift a book or two, what would they be? Or what? It could be your favorite books, but I'm trying to limit a book nerd to
Yeah,
a
yeah,
handful of
you
books.
can't see my bookshelf over here. That's full. So, gosh, there are
Jeff,
so
I get
many.
5 books a week. My wife thinks I'm crazy, so I completely identify with it.
Oh, that's awesome. That is awesome. I tell you, one of the great leadership books that I read years ago and still recommend it. You caught me off guard. I gotta pick it out of. Sorry, I'm off camera. I'm
It's all
grabbing my book.
good. Well, half the audience has listened to just the audio track, so they don't know that.
So, Leadership and Self Deception.
Okay.
It's one of my favorite leadership books. I recommend it all the time. It's basically teaches you how to look at yourself without the guises of self deception, how to peel that away. And we were talking earlier about be your authentic self, know who you are, own who you are. This is kind of that. It
Eh,
helps you peel those the onion layers back to find out so that you can be a leader without those guises of self deception. So that I think that I'll still stick with that one.
That's a,
as my
I,
recommendation.
I have to ask a history one that comes to mind. If it doesn't put that should flow a little easier.
Oh, Undaunted Courage. You mentioned it.
Yeah.
It's a great book about Lewis and Clark. It's more focused on Meriwether Lewis and his
Yes.
life. It's basically a biography of Meriwether Lewis. Uh, One that really got me going on the Lewis and Clark story is an author. His name is James Alexander Thom, Thom. He was out of Bloomington, Indiana, and he wrote. He's passed away now, but he wrote novels based on fact. So
Okay.
they're historical novels, but they're based on facts. So he wrote a story called From Sea to Shining Sea, which is the story of the Clark family.
Okay.
William Clark was the younger brother of great American hero George Rogers Clark. But the Clark family was filled with these types of huge personalities, uh, key to the foundations of our country, the Revolutionary War, and beyond. And it was just a great story. So I encourage people to pick that up too.
Is that Missouri or Kentucky?
Kentucky.
All right. Those are great ones. All right, just a couple of additional questions. It's always a fun one. If you're thinking about yourself as a young person and kind of what you're going through, what you're doing, what advice do you have for your 21-year-old self based on this journey?
Oh man. I actually, believe it or not, wrote a blog post a couple years ago. Basically, what I would tell my 17-year-old self.
Well, we could do
Um,
17 if it flows
so
easier, that's for sure.
So when I was that age, the only thing I ever wanted to do was be a rock star. That's what I did. I spent all my time playing guitar, writing songs, writing song lyrics. They were horrible, just saying. There's a reason I'm not a rock star. But what I would tell that person and what I told myself in that blog was put the guitar down and focus on what you're good at. You are a good leader. You take care of the people that follow you. So forget that path, and let's go down this path of computers and leadership because that's what you were created to do. That's what you were born to do.
That's fantastic. I'm dying to see if we can't get a picture of Rockstar Jeff for this to post, put in the put in the meeting minutes or maybe even hippie coder Jeff. It might be fun along the way.
There are some pictures of that floating around. Trust
I'm
me.
sure there are.
I
So
think my hair was longer than yours.
I get it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, at this
yeah.
point, it's the only thing I have that still works, Jeff. So
And if
might as
I didn't
well.
have this bald spot back here, I'd still look like that. Yeah,
There you
yeah.
go. So it's far from the end, or you've got lots of bends in the river left. I think people are going to want to. They're going to want to find out and keep track of where they can get the book. And obviously, there's a lot of interest in our leadership journeys,
Yeah.
and you've got a lot to say. And I know you blog and have posts around that. Where can people find you, keep track of you, and if they want the book, what do they do?
All right. So the easiest way is my website,
Okay.
www.jeffreystun.com. That is it's under renovation right now, but it's out there. You can sign up for my mailing list there. I send out. I promise I don't spam people. I send out one every couple of weeks or so. A lot of times it's about a blog that I've written. The blogs these days, as you mentioned, Chris, are focused on building interest in the book. So it's
Yes.
snippets from the book, it's stories that didn't make it into the book, those types of things. Um, so that would be the easiest way. I'm also a big LinkedIn guy.
Great.
So people can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty easy to find there.
We'll make sure that that's in the meeting minutes. A lot of this stuff we can make sure is in there. And then um lots of I'm pretty blessed to have lots of folks that listen or pick up on this, obviously, when the book does come out, we can put some links in something
Absolutely.
I'm
That'd
doing
be
that
awesome.
week and,
Yeah.
do a follow up or even have you back for something brief for just the book launch itself, right?
That would be fantastic. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
did have the pleasure of reading an early manuscript. So if you guys are wondering why I know what's behind the curtain a little bit here, Jeff, you are an authentic leader in person. I appreciated the journey you shared in the book and that you've shared with me today. I really appreciate you being a guest on Outside Insights.
I'm very excited to have been here, Chris. I've enjoyed getting to know you and your background, and it's been a fantastic experience. So I appreciate it.
We'll have to do something on your other books as time allows. I love to have
Yeah,
guests back as they do different things.
absolutely, absolutely. I would love that.